How many wrestling fans do we have out here? All right. Do you know anything about Hulkamania?
Hulkamania?
Hulkamania.
If you want me to. What is Hulkamania?
Well, Hulkamania is the newest thing, Johnny. It's the thing that is sweeping the country. I'm sure some of these guys over here might know about it.
I mean, the big news this week is that Hulk Hogan has died at 71.
Yes.
What's been really interesting about the sort of a week after Hulk Hogan's death is that, by and large, everyone is rather indifferent to the news.
Yeah.
It's very curious.
Hulk Hogan will obviously get onto the main page of the BBC website, but it feels like after that day, no one seems to be talking about it. And the only people who are talking about it are the people who watched Hulk Hogan post Match with Rock in 2001 or whatever it was. And those people who have been following his career since then hate him, it seems.
Absolutely.
So it's the only wrestling cancellation I think I've ever experienced. And it so happens to be the person who changed the business and made the business what it is.
Yep.
He's up there with Vince McMahon. When Vince McMahon dies, it is going to be exactly the same vibes pretty much, isn't it, really? It is a really eerie, weird feeling.
There was a moment where I was just a little bit like, oh, this is the biggest news that wrestling can ever have.
Yeah, because it's Hulk Hogan.
It was.
And he is the biggest.
Yeah.
He's the biggest. He just is and was.
But I would say within 6 hours, you were just like, everyone is either indifferent to this or literally glad it happened. And I was like, it felt to me in some ways like wrestling would have to almost like grind to a halt for a bit, where you would go, this is our Christ figure, if you like, that his passing and his death is a moment that we, in some ways, have been waiting for, because we can then go, let us celebrate the single greatest star this business has ever seen. And what was really interesting was, within hours, it was clear that it was almost like the only thing I can compare it to is he just had no relevance to modern wrestling anymore.
I could see that.
The thing that really clicked into me was the idea that we have actually been, if you like, running the sort of videos you would have expected in the wake of Hogan's death. They have been running since about 2002 when he returned to the WWE, where they have constantly been doing great big career retrospectives, constantly asserting his place in the business, constantly showing his highlights. And so it's almost like he was already dead. And he's been dead for the last 23 years. And we've gone, yes, we know exactly what his story is and where he's from. So when he's dead, you're just like, right, sort of, I had a quarter of a century to get to this point. No one, it's just weird, because it's like, no one is putting together online celebratory videos. No one is going, here's the 10 matches about Hogan that you've never seen and must. So many contemporary wrestlers, people who are out there now, did not even tweet about Hogan's death. And that's astonishing. Normally, if anyone dies, if it's like a guy called, Blonky Frogman, and there's always going to be people going, Blonky was really... Blonky Frogman, so underrated. I remember when I got my start in Mudlick, Mississippi, Blonky was on top, and he was always there with a kind hand and a warm word. And what you realise is that there was just silence. This generation, and the last 20 years of them, really, they have no contact with Hogan.
To him, and those who have potentially don't have good words to say about him.
There will be people, and I say that, of course, and I'm overgeneralising. There will be a lot of people who their childhoods were massively influenced by Hogan and his larger-than-life cartoon superhero nature.
And it's weird because physically he never, even to his dying day, he never changed physically. He didn't lose his hair. He'd already done that. He didn't lose, I think he lost a lot of weight, obviously, but he hadn't lost the Hulk Hogan visage.
He kept that Hulk Hogan nature, didn't he? And I suppose the funny thing about that is, that Hulk Hogan, if you like, our childhood Hulk Hogan, the childhood Hulk Hogan is still alive. You can see him at any time. He's still there. That body of work isn't going anywhere. You hoped there would be a redemption arc, didn't you? You hoped somehow he could come back into the fold. But the problem was he was unwilling to change, and the crowds were unwilling to forgive him until he did. And
and he proved himself to be duplicitous. He proved himself to be carny to the end. All of his stories, all of the bullshit, all of the crap, all of the lying, all of the... he was racist to the very end. The way he would talk about the presidential nominee...
Kamala Harris, that's right,
came in, was atrocious.
I said, do you want me to body slam Kamala Harris? You want me to drop a leg on Kamala? Is Kamala a chameleon? Is she Indian? Okay, I like it. How? I'm gonna get heat for that one, brother.
What a way to really I mean, he's done so much damage to his legacy in the last 2 years of his life.
Absolutely. I don't think anyone has managed to distance themselves from a character more than Hulk Hogan / Terry Bollea did. And it does feel like the Hulk Hogan character, he died 10 years ago. You know, that was it. It ended. And then for the last sort of decade, we've had Terry Hulk Bollea, who is this great big...
racist, carny wanker.
Sitting in a karaoke bar with, a knockoff Kermit the Frog, and he's flogging his real American beer in these horrible dive bars, and he's chucking beers out to the crowd, and they're pinging into the heads of women in the crowd who then sue him. And he's doing these odd promotional appearances where all he's doing is going, yeah, brah, yeah, brah. And of course, supporting Donald Trump and turning up at the National Republican Convention doing his terrible, over-the-top, gross right-wing stuff. And you do realise, you go, how did anyone who didn't see Hulk Hogan in his prime as the wrestler, why the fuck would you have any connection with this horrible old man that's been just knocking around for the past sort of 10, 15 years? Alan Cheapshot, he wrote a good Substack. He said older fans, late Gen X and older millennials, see Hogan as a symbol of childhood certainty. Younger fans don't. They grew up in an era where the internet existed, where no celebrity went unscrutinised, and Hogan's past wasn't revealed to them, it was waiting for them. But I mean, obviously the racism, it becomes a thing where if you haven't lived with Hogan and you don't have that thing of going, oh, well, he used to be great, now it's a real shame to see what he's become. You're just like, if you find it out the other way, you're like, there's this horrible racist man who used to be a pro wrestler. Do you want to see his matches? Not really. Not really. The actual reality of it was that had he genuinely apologised, been genuinely contrite, and didn't sort of try and wheedle his way out of it.
He basically just apologised for being caught rather than actually being racist.
That's right. And then he later said, well, this was a product of where I grew up in Tampa in Florida in the in the 1960s.
You worked with so many impressive, black people in your chosen field.
Yeah.
So it's not really an excuse, is it? I come from a racist town. Am I racist now? Well, the jury's out. We'll find out when someone catches me on a long lens or a long microphone. But, I mean, good God.
I would say in all the times I've known you, you've never been racist, but you don't think there should be women... You've always been very, very strong about that.
Oh, you should see me on the women's Euros, honestly.
I have
phoned into Talk Sport.
I have loved that. I tell you what, when I put that on, I put on the finals. Gabby Logan kicked it off by just saying, of course, BBC Sport has lost a good friend this week. And I genuinely thought for a moment, they're going to do a quite fun thing about Hulk Hogan. It was actually, of course not. It was for a rugby commentator. And you realise the mainstream, everyone reported on the death of Hogan. It was on the BBC News. And what you realise is you kind of go to, I suppose, to wrestling fans, Hulk Hogan is the most popular man of all time, global icon, and one of the most recognisable stars of the last 50 years. To the mainstream world, Hulk Hogan is a bit like, say, David Hasselhoff. He's a pop culture icon. It's very funny. But do you know what? Doesn't actually care. It doesn't matter. It was all silly. And I think that's that sort of thing as well, where, unfortunately for Hogan, he isn't, if you like, a Ric Flair, who I think, when Flair dies, and when Flair was talking about Hogan this week, I really felt that Flair was also thinking about his own mortality. So Flair was very tearful. And I suppose what Hogan's become to a lot of wrestlers is, well, there's two things really. One is for someone like Flair, you go, do you know what? You might be the greatest wrestler in the world. You might be the biggest star. But if those last years are filled with controversy and you alienating people, then you have made your bed, and history isn't necessarily going to let you just get away with it and forget the bad times. Yeah. And I think Flair was worried about that.
But he was very respectful about his own place in wrestling and how much more money that obviously Hulk drew in his lifetime. He made it very clear that Hogan couldn't drink as hard as him, but Flair seemed really well put together.
Yeah.
He didn't seem pissed, and it was a really heartfelt little piece, I thought.
I think for a lot of wrestlers of that era, it was unimaginable that Hogan would die. And I think with it, what basically that's done is it's drawing the curtains on their era. There is, without someone like Hogan, why are Raw going to do Please Welcome the Stars of the 1980s? I mean, there was a SmackDown tribute that they did, and there's a photograph of the sort of guys of the 80s who were invited along to stand on the stage while they had the 10-bell salute. And there was Sergeant Slaughter and Hacksaw Duggan, and Jimmy Hart was there, Gerald Briscoe, people like that. B. Brian Blair, who was a very close friend of Hogan's. And they were pictured in the dressing room, and they were just sitting on these disparate chairs and somber. And I think there is a part of it where you go, without Hogan, this is really going to draw a veil over this era.
Generation, yeah.
It really is. He was always the person where if Hogan was there, well, you could bring Hacksaw Jim Duggan along and then you're celebrating the 80s. When it's just Hacksaw and Sergeant Slaughter, the big stars from that period are no longer here. So their value also diminishes. It was notable that of all the people who did post up tributes, most of them were from a different generation. So you had Sting, The Rock, Ric Flair, obviously, Kevin Nash, Kurt Angle, Undertaker, Triple H and Jake Roberts, but all of them focused on Hogan's legacy and contribution to the wrestling business.
Yeah.
No one was there going, he was always such a great friend to me, such a nice guy. The only one is probably Jimmy Hart.
Yes.
And Jimmy Hart, I mean, you talk about the veil coming down on, the things you can do. Hogan's like a shark, and Jimmy Hart is like one of those little cleaner fish clinging to the underside. And that's not to diminish Jimmy Hart. He seems like a really lovely guy and a big-hearted guy, and was one of the only people who was visibly upset during the 10-bell salute. It is so strange to see a 10-bell salute for a big wrestler and nobody is crying. Nobody. Not even Zelina Vega. They stick her at the front because she cries. She cries, man. She's emotional. And when Zelina Vega is dry-eyed, you have not lived your life well. You know, and I feel for those guys. And I think Flair is also watching that and just going, I'm the last of my ilk now. I'm the last bona fide 1980s big main eventer, and it's not looking good for me. And it looks like, we're about to be extinct. And I did find that sort of astonishing, really. The end of an era, the passing of an era. It's remarkable. I think, the guys from that era, of course, had always seen him as the leader. That's the big thing. And he'd given so many of them jobs. So when he jumped to WCW, he brought Hacksaw Jim Duggan along. He brought the Honky Tonk Man along. He would bring all of that crew.
He put TNA into a fucking mountain with all of his friends.
Yeah,
My God.
Absolutely. And Eric Bischoff, his tribute, and this is someone who was obviously close to Hogan and had been close with him at the end because they were doing this amateur wrestling league, which has been an absolute disaster. I mean, it hasn't sold a single fucking ticket. And
that's what Flair said. I think he'd sort of made some decisions business-wise that hadn't gone very well. But it's like, you're still Hulk Hogan, you've still made a lot of money and you continue to.
Imagine Ric Flair telling you you'd made bad business decisions. I mean, Jesus Christ. But Eric Bischoff just tweeted, "Thanks for the house, Hulk." And I looked at that and I was like, that sounds a bit fucking callous, isn't it? And it's absolutely true. Hogan made loads and loads of these guys rich. And I do think, they're grateful. But Eric Bischoff was literally working with him. He probably knew he was unwell. There is a question that people have had in the last couple of months, which is Bubba the Love Sponge, the DJ who secretly filmed Hogan having sex in the video that basically ruined his entire life.
Yeah, it's the Jimmy Hart, Bubba the Love Sponge connection that seemed to be how information was getting out of Hulk's North Korea. It's a fascinating few weeks when you sort of think about it.
It was, and Bubba the Love Sponge had spent a lot of time saying he's at death's door. He's no longer communicating, that sort of thing. This is looking really bad. Doctors have given him hours, not days, and everybody denied it. But the one thing that didn't happen is there was no appearance from Hogan. And so then people began going, interesting. But he was basically saying Hogan was ill. Jimmy Hart was like, I saw him literally yesterday, brother.
He was doing karaoke.
Hanging a bang, I'm doing karaoke. And they were literally like, 20 minutes later, they were like, Hulk Hogan is unfortunately dead at 71.
Jimmy.
Kayfabe to the end, isn't it?
Yeah.
Kayfabe to the end.
Good on him.
And by the way, with those wrestlers coming out, I mean, I would look back on that. And in Vince McMahon's day, if Hulk Hogan had died when Vince McMahon was still in charge, and he'd have seen the shot of Jacob Fatu with his hands in his pockets during the 10-bell salute, or fucking Dom Mysterio chewing gum during it, there would have been a mass firing. Another thing on those packages, by the way, all VO'd by Triple H. And Triple H is shit at voiceovers. He is so bad at it. Hulk Hogan, he'll say. It's like, what? Just, yeah.
Hulk Hogan defines sports entertainment. Hulk Hogan is sports entertainment.
One of the icons of our business. You know, what? Just fucking relax, right?
By the early 90s, Hollywood came calling again. There were TV series and more movies before a shocking arrival in WCW.
Nobody ever wanted a Triple H promo. I'm sorry. Like, nobody ever wanted to hear him talk. I don't know why he feels like he needs to talk now.
No, absolutely. They had a little, here's Hogan and Triple H doing the pose, and then Hogan and John Cena. And it's just that thing of going, you do realise if you weren't here, they would never bother putting that in. Nobody connects the two. There was no picture of Mr. America, which was a fun run. There was no picture of him with Edge, who he won the tag team titles with, because Edge is the enemy. And all of that politics there, and you see all those political choices that have been made, and then you see Vince McMahon going in, and you go, that was a choice. You just wanted to go, don't worry, Daddy Vince, we haven't forgotten you.
You'll be back.
There were a few people from later generations, like The Miz, Matt Hardy, and Matt Cardona, and they all posted things about Hogan being their childhood hero, saying, it was a thrill to get to work with him and everything like that. Chelsea Green actually did do a tribute online to Hogan, just saying what a huge star he was. But she didn't mention the controversy, and she ended up getting death threats. She had to basically walk away from her social media and say, this was supposed to be fun and it really isn't. And it's just amazing that Hogan is so toxic that not mentioning him being toxic is enough to effectively get you cancelled.
There's a lot of people talking a lot about their kind of connections with Hulk Hogan and stuff, but the people who grew up watching him stuff, I think that's slightly more interesting and slightly less conflicted, I think.
Yeah, I think so. You could never explain to someone who wasn't there as a youngster watching Hulk Hogan when he was the biggest star in the industry. You can never explain how big he was, how heroic he was, and how the entire WWF revolved around him. The presentation of it all was just, he was the biggest star. Unless you're going to go and watch it on a weekly basis, 35 years later, every week you're going to tune in exactly as it went out. You'll never understand the sort of the appeal of Hogan. And it's terrible to sort of go, you had to be there. But I mean, really, in the little tributes they had, there was a clip of him receiving his Hall of Fame award in 2005, and he was in a suit and he looked good. And really, had he been able to, if you like, use that moment and go, from now on I'm elder statesman of wrestling, then he would have been remembered very, very differently. If he'd have gone, now I'm going to teach promo to all these kids, and like Dusty Rhodes did, then I think the industry and the generation of people who've been in it in the last 15 years would genuinely lament his passing.
Listen to where Dusty comes from. Do you know what I mean? If you're going to sort of pick out who's going to be the fucking racist, Hulk Hogan or Dusty Rhodes, and Dusty Rhodes was relevant, Dusty Rhodes was important, and Dusty Rhodes was loved up until the point he drew his final breath.
Throughout his career, it made it very clear how anti-racist he was. I mean, Dusty Rhodes is the best example of that, because if you'd have said in 2025, an unimaginably long way from their heyday, who would be the sort of better remembered? And I don't mean as in more people knowing, but I mean who would be regarded by this industry as being the more beloved. It would seem absolutely just like you were being totally contrary to say it would be Dusty Rhodes. And Dusty Rhodes' stock has just grown and grown and grown and grown, because clearly he lived his life in a brilliant way, putting stuff back and giving back to the industry that made him. Hogan, it always felt, he was willing to, if you like, grace the wrestling industry with his presence every now and then if it benefited him. And it's a funny thing, the wrestling industry, how it doesn't forget, and it does reward loyalty, those who are loyal. and those who are damaging to it, it begins to slowly push away. I've found it fascinating. I mean, there will never be another person like Hulk Hogan. The industry's changed in different ways, and he was also unique. Nobody else could have been the Hulk Hogan that Hulk Hogan was. That is fascinating, and the very fact that as a divisive star and someone who was so important to the industry, it's amazing to see, if you like, the reaction to his death being so different from any other wrestler. What's your, if I was to say, Pete, and we haven't rehearsed this, I'm not going to ask you to sing. Can you do your song for Hogan, please? I WhatsApped you about this 2 hours ago. What would be, if your picture, if someone says Hulk Hogan, what's the thing you picture? What's the...
It's either the leg drop or him playing bass at the Slammies.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, that's the thing that kind of sticks in the head. His kind of the fact that they put him on the telly to sort of say this guy could be the new inserts TV star, and just gave him like a powerboat to scoot about on, and it just seemed to be like his star was about as big as it possibly could be, but he was still doing things like Suburban Commando and Mr. Nanny and stuff, and it was still, you're never big enough for Hollywood, are you? Really?
No, and they put that in a lot of the tributes, the WWE ones, and I was a bit like, no one's going to look back on that and go, oh yeah, I forgot how talented and versatile he was. They were like Mr. Nanny, Suburban Commando, no holds barred, and it's just like, oh my god, this is not doing good. This is not helping.
It's basically saying that your biggest star couldn't even get on Silk Stockings, Silk Stockings ran longer, I think, than his TV show.
A lot of wrestling news sites just going, it's incredible the range of people that Hogan worked with, and they're all paying tribute to him. And it was just Brooke Shields going, sad to hear about Hulk Hogan. He was on an episode of my sitcom, Suddenly Susan, and there was a picture of her arm wrestling him. And I was like, it's not really a tribute, is it? It's more just sort of like, I knew them.
This happened and I knew them, and there's a picture of me with that person.
Exactly that. I think for me, I think of two things. One is I think of the pinfall on the Iron Sheik, which, for many years was effectively going, this is day one of Hulkamania. And it did change the business. And him just roaring as he, has smashed up the Sheik in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Sheik is on his back like a little tortoise and his legs are shaking, and Hogan is pinning, and he's just roaring. And the roar is sort of why he was good, because he did the pin. And so many wrestlers of that era would have gone, thank you very much, thank you very much. And he was just like, this is something new. This is just 100 miles an hour, full steam ahead. And I find that bit of him shouting as he pins him, that for me is sort of the distillation of the classic era of Hogan. And the other thing is the face-off with Andre the Giant. A match much mythologized and little watched. In some ways, really, I mean, the whole mythology that's built up around that match, it does seem like it was just such a big moment in wrestling. And the visual of Andre looking down at Hogan as Hogan is just, never going to take a step back. That, for me, are the two defining images of Hogan. And, look, I'm glad that we've both got, if you like, your first image is just going, there was this great character. And, probably the third is where he's got the orange Kermit the Frog on his lap.
It doesn't get any better than that.
No, it doesn't.
What a way to go out. Brother. Looking at his kind of early years as like, Super Destroyer and the part of the Boulder Brothers and stuff. Sterling Golden in 1979 fighting Bret Hart, and then just, his first appearance as Hulk Hogan was, he was fighting someone called Ben Ortiz.
Oh, yeah.
1 minute and 14 seconds match. Literally 0 reviews on Cage Match. Not the first man who fought Hulk Hogan was a man from Puerto Rico, and there's just no reviews.
How
of him
incredible.
at all.
Yeah, during an episode of All Star Wrestling from 5th of January 1980. It's because, I mean, those clips aren't there because the WWE want you to know that the story began in 84 when he beat the Iron Sheik. But he did have his early run, took on people. He actually, there's a match of his against Jim Duggan as well when he's a big rule breaker, and Ted DiBiase. But the Jim Duggan one is sort of less well known and more fun in a strange way.
Tony Atlas earlier on as well.
That's right, and Tony Atlas, one of the few people who had a pinfall victory over him in the 80s. Yeah, Hogan really benefited from the fact that, as you mentioned, Pete, he always looked the same, and he was able to actually work for what would it be? You know, nearly 25 years, and he was still recognisably the same man.
Yeah.
And that gave him longevity. He was very lucky about that. But it's only when you see him in 1980, you go, he always looks about 45, you know, at best.
Even at school, like, we were looking at a picture of him over the weekend, and he looks such like a slob.
He does. Head
he had
like
really
a ham,
slobby
didn't
face,
he?
Yeah,
real great American beef head.
beef head, yeah.
Beefy head. So yeah, I mean, what a strange show to have to do. The Hulk Hogan Memorial WrestleMania show was always going to be strange, I think. I just don't think I thought it was going to be anything like this. Someone did a tweet, and it stuck with me here. He's a guy called Bubba the OG. He said, truth be told, Hulk Hogan was faker than his profession, and racism is his legacy. It is who he was. If he wanted to be remembered differently, he should have lived differently. Feel free as well, you know, put your comments down underneath this one. You slightly need a place to be able to get your thoughts about Hogan off your chest. And no pile-ons, please. Everyone just be respectful. It's because it's interesting. He's such a titan, just to even get your head around how it makes you feel. I'd be interested to see, because it'll help. Probably help me work my way through how I feel. I don't really know. Look, there we go. Therapy. Free therapy. So until next week, when unless Ric Flair dies, we will do Judgment Day 1998.
Unless, where do we draw the line though? Where does it kind of? I don't know it.
One of the Hardys. If Jeff dies, no Judgment Day. If Matt dies, probably Judgment Day. WrestleMania!